In this episode, I will go over The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker, which is the inspiration for the movie Hellraiser. And it is a disgustingly beautiful book, packed with explorations of the psyche, of sin, temptation. So if you like this topic, and if you want to know how Clive Barker is able to communicate a lot of these things, stay tuned. Welcome to Biblioccultus, where I review books that I find interesting in the topics of religion, philosophy, history, and fiction. Before we begin, please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video, and I will be more than happy to engage you in that section if you want. So, The Hellbound Heart by Clive Barker. The edition that I have with me here is by HarperCollins from 2007. Very nice, not expensive at all to find online. And like I always say, you can get whichever edition is best for you. Hardcover, softcover, doesn't matter. Now this video won't be very long because I'm trying my best here not to give you any spoilers for the book, but at the same time I want to entice you to it. As many of you probably already know, the movie Hellraiser is based on this small work. Now for some of you, you will have the same experience I did, which is that you may have seen the movie first already before you actually dive into this book. I saw the movie as a kid, and it created quite an impression on me just because of the themes that were being discussed and the imagery. Now, Clive Barker participated directly in the movie, which is not very common. Usually authors are not directly involved in the cinematic presentations of their works. And this is why I dislike very much most movies that are based on books. I think they tend to oversimplify, and also they kind of force the director's viewpoint of the work on the moviegoer. So the beauty of a book is that you have freedom in the way you envision the work, and that actually generates a lot of very interesting results. But with a movie, you're stuck with the director's vision. And not only the director, but even the production team and all the politics and all the economic motivations that are behind films. And I think they tend to ruin books. I would argue Hellraiser, it's in its own category, and I do appreciate the film, although I do still think that the book is superior for all the reasons I already explained. So one of the things I really enjoyed about the work, and I found to be impactful, and that I didn't notice at all in the original film, is the use of the term cenobite. The term may have been used in the film, but not in a way that was prominent enough for me to remember it. But reading the book, it stands out very dramatically. And the term cenobite is really an allusion to the Christian ascetics, to the order of monks in the Christian tradition. It references community life, so that this term being used and applied to a collection of demonic sadomasochists is obviously quite interesting and quite antinomian, and obviously that makes it very cool in my opinion. Now, of course, this sadomasochistic element to them, again, is suggested in the work. Although, when you watch the film, it seems quite obvious because, again, by the production team and the set design and the costume designer dressing the cenobites in a particular way, it gives you more of a suggestion of this idea. Whereas when you read the book, it is not there. At least not as clearly as it is in the film. So again, that will be a difference you will notice for sure. Now this book is about lust and pleasure, and it's also about the consequences of this. So interestingly, the work has an underpinning of Christian ethics and morality, because it clearly presents one of the characters in the book as being a deviant, a degenerate, and as being lost in his desires, in his need for unfettered exploration of pleasure to a point that is perverse. And that point of view itself is a classic normative approach to this topic. And I don't mind it at all. I think it is a classic morality tale, if you will. But it is dressed up in a modern horror context. And that to me is very, very special in this genre. It's also about fantasy. And what I mean by that is it explores the notion that human beings have a very extreme capacity to imagine and desire and to fantasize to such a point that it leads to absurd and ridiculous consequences. I do sense a level of comedic cynicism in the work. A lot of the scenes are so absurd and so extreme that you wonder why this person is still engaging in this dynamic. And it's either because they're crazy or they're stupid. And that actually turns the book into an additional avenue of exploration. And again, I do think that that makes the work unique. How far are we willing to go in the wrong path? Do we commit to that wrong path to a point of being so obviously wrong that we can't complain about what's happening? I actually think that's one of the points of the book, or at least one of the things I derive from it. Now, this book is worthy of being quoted. I think it will give you a flavor for the work itself.
A downward spiral began. He spent 3 months in a wash of depression and self-pity that bordered on the suicidal. But even that solution was denied him by his newfound nihilism. If nothing was worth living for, it followed, didn't it, that there was nothing worth dying for either. He stumbled from one such sterility to the next, until all thought were rotted away by whatever opiate his immoralities could earn him.
Now, before I continue with that section, because there's another small paragraph that goes after, notice how the author is involving a kind of spiraling, decadent nihilism that stems from a very disturbed inclination towards pleasure-seeking and self and sense gratification. The loss of all desire at the end of the experience, a numbness that stems from actually engaging in this kind of lifestyle. So it's a beautiful criticism of modern culture, actually, in which everything is about the self and about enjoyment and about using others to self-gratify. And this character loses all sense of even existence. So from a philosophical point of view, it's a very clear-cut criticism to this kind of lifestyle. Continuing here.
How had he first heard of the Lemarchand box? He couldn't remember. In a bar, maybe, or a gutter, from the lips of a fellow derelict. At the same time, it was merely a rumor. This dream of a pleasure dome where those who had exhausted the trivial delights of the human condition might discover a fresh definition of joy. In the route to paradise, there were several, he was told, charts of the interface between the real and the realer, still made by travelers whose bones had long since gone to dust.
So here's where you hear about the infamous box that is actually such a symbol of the film. Most people, when they think of Hellraiser, they think of the Lemarchand mechanism, which is this little puzzle box which you engage with to cross dimensions. In the book, it seems to fulfill the gateway tool from which you can explore the supernatural, because this work, it's a supernatural exploration. Instead of the cop-out of abandoning the supernatural for scientific or materialistic explanations. Clive Barker here goes into the supernatural as a mechanism to actually consider these things. Consider the nature of the soul, consider the nature of materialism, consider the engagement of desires and a world beyond desires. Or in this case, how it would be to live in a dimension where pleasure and desire has no end. So I'm very thankful for this work because I've always been a fan of supernatural horror in particular. So being able to enjoy this at this level in a very short work is very nice. It also, as a work, explores how you can extract love from something hateful, something horrid, disgusting, but how human beings can slowly put themselves in a position that they can start loving something that is actually unlovable in a way. Like I said, there is a clearly Christian undertone to the work, which does explore how sin corrupts and can confuse itself with pleasure. So this idea of pain and pleasure is explored and developed very nicely in the work without going too far into it. But like I said, even hell and the members of hell follow the rules of justice. There is a overarching theme, which is that at the end of it all, there is such a thing as justice. And that to me is very important to consider when you explore this book. And I would say in closing, I have reviewed Clive Barker before in this channel. I did a reject review, which I didn't like one of his novels. And I think the reason, like I mentioned in that video, is that I think Clive Barker shines better when he does short stories and small novellas. Because I think his skill is really on putting everything together in a compact way. And I think that when he expands on a work and he tries to take these kinds of explorations in a very long fashion by stretching everything, it creates a somewhat negative effect. But again, I haven't read all his full novels, so I'm engaging all his works now, and as I go through them, I will review them here and present to you my thoughts on those. As far as this work, it is actually in my favorites list. It goes beyond just being a great book. I actually have it in a category of being one of my favorites. So I highly suggest you get it, and I think you will agree with me. It is an excellent work of art. So please remember to subscribe to the channel, click the bell for notifications, like the video, share the video, and comment on the video. It really helps the channel out. Thank you for being with me. See you next time.